All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Per the usual, I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod. We're kicking off episode 294, and today is a fitness focused episode of Help Me Understand. Before we get into about 4 to 5 questions that I'm going to cover on today's episode, I, as always, want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I got caught up for a second. I always want to take a moment just to express that gratitude because I know that you have plenty of other podcast content that you can and most likely do consume. So I truly never take it for granted and want to show appreciation for you, including the Help Me Understand podcast in hopefully your weekly listening queue. So I do appreciate it. By the way, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, you just happen to click on this particular episode, I would appreciate that if at any point in time during this episode, you feel like, hey, I'd like to get more of this on a regular basis, that you do go ahead and subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you may be listening or watching this on. So I truly do appreciate it. All right, this particular episode is being recorded and released on a Thursday, which is outside of the usual rhythm that I do here. Typically, the fitness focused stuff is going to come out on a Tuesday. However, made some adjustments to my schedule, and still we move forward and meet the commitment of a fitness focused episode every single week. So that can be a bit of a reminder for you also. Try to practice what I preach more often than not. And also just a reminder for you that your commitments, even when you may not get them in at the time that you thought you would get them in, you may have an opportunity to still fulfill that. So my commitment is at minimum one episode per week that's focused on fitness related topics. Typically that'll be on a Tuesday. Didn't happen on Tuesday, and that still doesn't have to mean that it's like, well, it'd be weird for me to put it out on a Thursday or a Friday or a Saturday. At the end of the day, we get it done. All right, so let's get into it. These are 4 to 5 questions. I'm moving between my computer and my phone. I'm actually pulling these particular ones from Threads posts that were either questions or just statements that were made, and I jumped into the comments. And this episode or this podcast is where I can provide more context, more nuance, just more explanation for the answers that I gave. So this first person posted, I'm on my third round of a 30-day bar program. This round, I've challenged myself more by wearing a 15-pound weighted vest. Question, is bar enough for strength training? Or should I stop after this round and start lifting again? I also walk about an hour a day, get my 10,000 steps. Thanks in advance. As I often do, I first commented with a question to perhaps provide some more context to the initial question that was posted. So the initial question that was posted is bar enough for strength training, or should I stop after this round and start lifting again? So the follow-up question that I asked is, what led you to stop the lifting before? And the response that she gave was, I got bored, if that makes sense. So that was at least enough to provide some general advice, I would say. So my response there, and I'll go into a little bit more detail here, my response there was for sure that made sense. So we got somebody who got bored and moved to a 30-day bar program. They're now on their third round of that particular program. And this time around, they're adding a weighted vest. And so they're trying to figure out, is that going to be enough for strength training, or should they stop doing the bar completely and go back to lifting? And they previously had stopped doing the lifting because they got bored. So my response to that was that lifting weights paired with proper nutrition and sleep will help you fully build strength and muscle in ways that wearing a weighted vest at bar won't be able to do. So my general recommendation is you start with integrating 1 to 2 full body lifting sessions into your week, and then still do your bar that you enjoy. consider removing the weighted vest during your bar work and let the weightlifting be your strength work. So let me take a couple of minutes just to provide some additional context to why I answered that question the way that I answered it, because I am a strong believer that this is one of the primary reasons that folks stay on the hamster wheel, or what I've started calling continually taking a series of left turns. So basically just continuing to take a left and then a left and then another left in their fitness journey. Primary cause of that is, or primary driver for that is not getting an understanding of why they're being given the answer that they're being given. So first, I mentioned that I would recommend starting with integrating 1 to 2 full body lifting sessions into their week and still doing the bar that they enjoy. The reason that I would start with that as the recommendation is because their past self-reported history is that they've done one thing or the other thing. They haven't done both of them at the same time. And so what happens is they do the lifting and then they get bored. And this is, I'm using this particular individual as an example because they were brave enough to post this and actually have some interaction with it. This is easily something that translates to all of us. So when we look at a situation like this, I believe that some of us can probably see ourselves in this particular scenario in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to be specifically about bar. So we will do something and be all in on that, but get bored with it or unsure that we're making progress, whatever the case may be. So we move to something completely different, even though we may have enjoyed what we were doing. So the same scenario here. If she enjoys doing her bar classes, and I'm going to just address the weighted vest thing second. However, if she enjoys doing those bar classes, then I wouldn't recommend eliminating those at all, because that's something that brings her joy. That's something that's fulfilling for her. And also it is exercise. She's also recognizing, though, a need to challenge herself with strength training. So props on that too. So instead of saying, stop doing bar, there's no point to doing that, you're wasting your time, because it's not what I would recommend is generally accepted for structured strength training, and move completely over to strength training. Notice my answer is, let's integrate 2 full body strength training sessions. Let that be your strength training and let your bar be your bar. It's movement, it's additional exercise, it's whatever you want to call it. Just don't count that as your strength training. Count strength training, resistance training with dumbbells, kettlebells, machines, barbells, whatever you have access to. Use that as your strength training, because those are movements, those are exercises that are going to allow you to do some of the most basic foundational things that need to be a part of something that's truly strength and muscle building related. So things like progressive overload, things like being able to use variations with particular movements and specific targeted muscle groups and all that stuff. So that's why I recommended integrating 1 to 2 full body lifting sessions per week versus eliminating the bar and only doing the strength training. The other part of that recommendation was to consider removing that weighted vest during the bar work. With this particular one, this probably has been a podcast episode in the past. I'm not totally sure. The weighted vest thing, we're doing too much with the weighted vest. There's not a need for the weighted vest to be there, just period, point blank. So ditch the weighted vest and let your bar be your bar. Let your strength training be your strength training. The weighted vest, while it may make it feel a bit more difficult, it's not doing what you think it's doing. And especially when you are talking about exercise like bar, where you're getting into particular positions and things of that nature, a weighted vest that potentially, if it's actually, providing some sort of resistance, a weighted vest that's trying to move you in a different direction and causing you possibly to even overcompensate for what you're trying to do with your body versus the direction the weighted vest is taking you. That can be a recipe for some potential muscle imbalance, some potential injury, and all sorts of other things. So that's what I would say with that. Okay, hopefully that helps with that particular question. All right, let's see. Another one that was posted was about folks who, or actually, let me just read the question or read the post because I thought it was interesting. The person said, "Why do so many fitness enthusiasts resort to shaming and insulting tactics to motivate, air quotes, motivate people to take their fitness seriously? When has that ever worked? I think y'all are just using that as an excuse to be mean to people you don't actually like without being checked for it." Okay, I had to pause for a minute and sneeze, so hopefully I edited this correctly. All right. So, with this particular question, my response in the comments was there's a segment of the population that marketing tactic, because that's primarily what it is, works for because it triggers an emotion and they see it as a tough love approach. And I did also mention, to be clear, I'm answering the question you asked, not defending or agreeing with said tactic. And this is definitely something that is out there in the fitness space where it comes to what this particular individual is framing as shaming and insulting tactics to try to motivate people. There's a particular creator that I can think of right now, and pretty sure it's Ryan Fisher, who has posted some stuff in the past that for the population that I serve, I find to be extremely problematic. And an example would be, uh, I'm going to put in the disclaimer that I may have some of the specific details wrong about this post, and also the general tenor or the general tone, I guess, of the post was along the lines of, if you're trying to motivate yourself to not go into the fridge and grab like bad, unhealthy food, then you should put basically a mirror on the fridge so you can see how fat you are. And I would put things like that underneath this heading of resorting to shaming and insulting tactics to motivate people. There are for sure people out there who that motivates them. They are motivated by the person, like the trainer, for example, in person that is taking like the Jillian Michaels Biggest Loser, like, you're fat, you've never accomplished anything, and this is why you're gonna die, or whatever the case may be. Like, I basically kind of think like the David Goggins, like the how bad do you want it? Because you clearly have never accomplished anything in your life. Like, maybe that might seem a little extreme. And yeah, there's definitely people that are out there. There's also, though, I think not quite to that extreme. There's also a few rungs on the ladder below that is really more of like what I'll call it like the call out culture. And I think that this is primarily more along the lines of where this particular post might be pointed towards. Or actually, I'll just translate that's my perspective on it. And that's what I would actually like to share my perspective on. So, not the extreme, like put a mirror in front of on the door of the fridge so that you see how fat you are, like stand there without a shirt off and see how fat you are before you open the fridge, and that'll be your motivation not to open the fridge. A few rungs below that would be basically the like picking, there's a strategy called pick the pain. So you identify what that person's pain point is, and you just pick at it and pick at it and pick at it to the point where they realize, where they believe, like, you know what, this person, like, yeah, they might be being mean, but they're just offering me some tough love, and they're right. I've never been happy with what my midsection looks like. They're right. I keep hiding when it comes to time to take family photos. I make sure one of my kids is standing in front of me because I don't want my belly to be seen. Yeah, they're right. Whenever there are photos that are taken, I have to see that photo before it's allowed to be posted in public. Yeah, they're right. I eat really healthy in front of friends and coworkers, and then I secretly eat in my car before I go inside the house. Like, you identify what that pain point is, and then you basically bring it to the light. You take it out of private, you bring it to public, and you pick at it, the pick the pain strategy. So you just continue to pick at that, so that that individual, one, they understand that you know what they're up to, and two, you're not keeping it private. You are like, I'm going to keep at this until you reach out because you clearly need help. And there is, I think, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. I didn't take a lot of notes before doing this episode, which might be very clear right now. I think that there is truly a benefit, and I believe that there's a strong benefit to being able to understand what's really happening with people beneath the surface, like what their real issue is. And also, I believe that it comes down to the value system of the coach, the trainer, the teacher, the whoever. It comes down to their value system as to how they handled that particular piece of information. So for someone like myself, I can see those same signs just as well, and humbly, maybe even better than some folks can see. Very, I feel very confident in my ability to see what's actually going on beneath the surface and see where someone's pain points actually are. And also, I believe that there is a tactful and still direct way that shows a level of empathy to bring that to the conversation. And also, in the same breath, I will let you know it does not market well when you don't speak directly to what that particular issue is, because there are times where folks will label particular, because we're really talking about content here is what it comes down to. So there are folks who will say that particular content they find to be shaming and insulting. And from my point of view, I believe that they're labeling it as insulting because it has struck a nerve, because they know that that thing is actually true. So they're basically having a very adverse reaction, or they're having an emotional reaction to something that has struck a nerve. And the thing is, that's what good marketing does. That's what great marketing does, is it evokes an emotion. It provides there's some sort of a trigger that's there. Now, this gets into a whole different realm of marketing and publicity. And when people say like any publicity is good publicity, like doesn't mean it matter good or bad. I don't necessarily prescribe to that. And also, I just want to share with you all who may not be in the fitness industry that it's strategic. So you are going to have folks who you are looking at as they're a coach, they're a trainer, and not realize that these days, we as coaches probably are spending, I'm trying to think I don't want to speak for anybody else, so let me speak for myself. Probably spending from an education standpoint at like right now, I am likely about 50-50 on educating myself, continuing to educate myself on exercise, and 50-50 on continuing to educate myself about understanding content, marketing, nurturing, client acquisition, just all of those things. And that was not the case about 10 years ago. So as social media has grown, as YouTube has grown, as different platforms have grown, and the industry has grown larger and larger and larger, folks who got into the fitness business specifically because they had a love for fitness are finding that they're needing to spend, if they want to have some sort of a successful business, are needing to spend time understanding marketing. And that's really what it's coming down to. It's coming down to the value system of the individual who is learning the particular tactics and techniques and strategies. Because I can sit in a meeting or sit in a classroom session and I can be taught the same thing about, hey, you've got to be very specific about the problem that the individual has that you can provide an answer for. I can sit in that same session with another person. And if that other person is like, oh, hell yeah, I know exactly, I'm going in, and that will work for them. For myself, it won't necessarily, I believe it doesn't necessarily work as well to take that same route because that's just not my brand. So my brand is more along the lines of, I'm going to identify what those things are and also do more of the question asking. Like, hey, have you ever noticed this? Have you ever gotten curious about why you do that? Versus, yo, I noticed you do this, and I know that it's because you're uncomfortable because you're fat. Like they're two very different approaches to what two people are seeing the same thing. All right, I believe that I've belabored this point a bunch, and also this one I wanted to spend more time on than the other ones, just because I don't think that this is going to change. Or change for the better. Let me put it that way. I think that the attention economy is thriving right now, and you even have uh, court cases or something along those lines with companies like Meta or Facebook. I can't remember which arm of their business uh, was sued and I think settled, maybe, or maybe even lost the lawsuit around like creating ways to keep people more addicted to their platforms and their devices. So buckle up, just buckle up. I just wanted to try and provide more context than than just what I did in the comments. All right, let's see. I've got one more here. We're actually do one more because this is running a little bit longer than I wanted to. And this one is specific to exercise. So the person asked, when you're using machines, are you just using the targeted muscle group? For example, bicep curl machines, just using the bicep muscles. And while I don't have this particular one pulled up as far as how I exactly responded, the response is, for the most part, it's just about impossible to completely isolate one specific muscle group. So we can stay with the bicep curls thing. It's just about impossible to only activate your bicep when doing a bicep curl, whether you are using a machine that has like your elbow fixed and like a pad, say, behind the elbow so that your elbow doesn't swing back and forth. Um, there's a misconception that within the fitness industry, when we use words like isolation, there's a misconception that that truly means actually what the word is defined as, like isolated, like that thing alone. So what you will likely hear is bias. So for example, somebody will say, instead of something being a glute isolation move, like do this step up this particular way. There's a movement now, glute bias step ups. But somebody might say, do this particular movement, this particular glute step up to isolate your glutes. Well, when you perform that particular movement, it doesn't isolate just the glutes because you also are getting some quad activation. You are getting some calf activation. There's other muscle groups. You're getting some hamstring for sure. If you're doing it where you're holding onto a rack as you do that glute step up or step down, then you also are going to get some upper body activation because by holding onto the rack, and if you're watching this on video, you see me like putting my hands forward. If you're holding onto that rack, then you also are in an isometric position, like a fixed position in the upper body, and you're bracing. So you actually are doing some upper body work with that too. So instead of calling something an isolation movement, I believe that what would be more helpful going forward is to continue to refer to things as like a biased movement. So a glute biased step up, which would mean that we are moving ourselves in a way to where we are trying to bias the majority of the muscle engagement in a particular area. So for example, let's say that I am doing a bicep curl with a machine. So I'm seated on the machine and there's like handles that are maybe down near like my sides, near my feet. And I do that particular movement, do that bicep curl, yes, I am feeling, as long as it's being executed correctly, I am primarily feeling most of the engagement in my biceps. However, I will still get some um, some activation that will slightly happen in my tricep. I'll probably get some activation, just a little bit, that's going to happen in my front delt, my anterior delt. I will probably get some activation across my back too. I will also, if I'm staying in a good fixed position in that seated bicep curl machine, I will actually get some core development there too, because I'm bracing. So I'm getting some isometric core work. So there are always still, for any movement that you do, regardless of the machine, I want to leave myself a little bit of room to be wrong. So I'll say 99.2% of the time, you are going to also get some engagement in other areas. So the whole like isolation thing, it's a term that really, I think it would be most helpful for people if we started more consistently using the phrase like bias. So a glute biased step up, a um, let me see, like an upper back focused pull up, which would be typically then you're going to go like with a wider grip overhand, for example. So that's how I wanted to just bring some more attention to that particular question, because I think it's a really, really good one. And it also comes into play for folks like myself who do program design, because when you look at overall program design, one of the things that you focus on is how many sets per week you're doing per muscle group. And when we look at that, and let's say that we have somebody, like let's say that I have a client who really wants to focus on shoulders, and um, on average you want to work a muscle group 10 to 15 sets per week. This is on average 10 to 15 sets per week to see substantial growth, along with proper nutrition and proper sleep. Always going to throw that in there. Well, then when we look at that, it's not just specifically like when I look at it, and other trainers will likely do this somewhat differently, but there's some who do it the same way based on the people that I talk to. We won't look just at, okay, so that means 10 to 15 sets of overhead presses is shoulders, Arnold press is shoulders, lateral raises is shoulders, rear delts is shoulders, front raises is shoulders, and things like that. So only shoulder movements, those are what we're going to call direct work. So those are, again, things like presses, raises, where you're working anterior, posterior, and lateral delt. You're working all three pieces there. So yeah, that's a direct work. Then there's also what we call indirect. So for example, I would also take into account that when we're doing, say, like a lying on the bench, like a skull crusher, if you're familiar with skull crushers, those are something that are typically programmed as a triceps movement. The thing is, when you perform that particular movement, you are also getting some engagement and activation in the shoulders. So it's what we call an indirect movement. So I am also getting some shoulder work in there. So when we're thinking like this is nerding out on the trainer side. When I'm thinking that 10 to 15 sets per week, I'm I'm looking at direct work as the priority, and I'm also taking into account some of the indirect work there too, where it's targeted as a secondary group in some other movement. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I feel like I just went off in the weeds, but if you can't tell that I really like fitness stuff, there you go. All right. So we're going to keep it simple. We're going to cut it here. So covered three particular topics. So one, talked about the person who was doing a 30-day bar program and wondering if doing that with a weighted vest would be enough for their strength training. So we handled that one. Also talked about using shaming and insulting tactics to try and motivate people within the fitness industry. So broke that one down. And then last, talked about isolating muscle groups. Is that really a thing when using machines or just any sort of training apparatus? So I hope that these have been helpful, getting some additional insight, some context, and some nuance. For some folks, you may be like, bro, that was a lot. Like, you really kind of went down the rabbit hole on that. And from other folks, you may be like, dang, that actually, the additional pieces to that makes so much more sense now. And regardless of which person you are, I just appreciate the fact that you listen. So I appreciate you being here. With that, we're going to go ahead and bring today's episode to a close. So thank you so much again for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. You have feedback about today's show, questions that you'd like to submit for me to handle. Always down to hear those out. Shoot me a DM on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. You can also email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. All right. Thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you. Take care, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye now.